This video discusses how you can dynamically repopulate the choices in an HTML drop-down box, a select control, by using an AJAX callback. So the demo here is done in the dialog component, but all of these comments would apply equally to the grid component. So you can see here we have a dialog, and the choices in this drop-down right now are just A, B, and C. And now let's say we'd like to go and make an AJAX callback to some query on the server and get some new data and then repopulate the choices in this list. So if I go now and click this button, now you can see we've made an AJAX callback, and now you can see we have a totally different set of choices in the control. And the initial choices A, B, C have been eliminated. So now let's go back now and press this button where we say populate and set initial value. So initially when I pressed this value there was no value selected. So now I'm going to go here and populate and explicitly set the value to aqua, and you can see that's been set over there. And then finally I'm going to go here and then press this button which says add choices to the list. So now in this case I'm doing my AJAX callback, adding new values to the list, but keeping the initial value and also the initial selection in the list. So let's go now and take a look at how we did that. So if we go look, for example, at the first button, we can see that this is just using action JavaScript to make an AJAX callback, and the AJAX callback is doing a repopulate. So now let's go look at the XBasic function called repopulate. So here's our function. So LEID is the ID of the control we're trying to repopulate, and this is the naming convention that's used for controls in the dialog. So there's the dialog component name, and then .v.r1, which is always used for all controls in a dialog. In a grid, of course, R1 would depend on the current row in the grid, so that might be row 1, row 2, row 3, etc. Then to get the data we'd like to repopulate with, I'm just calling an XBasic function called a5.colorenum, which just returns a CRLF delimited list of data. So let's go and take a look at that. Now obviously in your own case you would be doing an AJAX callback, and then to get the list of data you would be doing a query against your database. So if I were to just go here and then execute that line right now and then go question mark data, I see that data is just a list of color names that are internal to Alpha 5. Then in this next line I'm sorting the list. So now if I go look at the list now, you can see it's been sorted. And then finally I'm calling this utility function in Alpha 5 that takes a CRLF delimited list and turns it into a JavaScript array. So if I go now and run that line over there and now look at what data looks like, I can see that this is now the JavaScript syntax for an array. So we've turned the CRLF delimited list into a JavaScript array syntax where each item has been included in single quotes. If necessary, the item value was JavaScript escaped, commas between all the entries, and then a square bracket to indicate that it's an array. So going back over here, you can see now we have our data in the right JavaScript notation, and then we're calling a built-in function from the Alpha 5 JavaScript library called a5.formPopulate. And if you go to the wiki, you'll see that it's described in the wiki. If you just do a search on the AJAX form library, you'll find the A5 form populate described over there. So the JavaScript command that we're constructing now is going to use a5.formPopulate. The second argument is the ID of the drop-down control that we wish to repopulate. The third argument is the initial value to show in the drop-down, which we've set to null. This next argument is the actual data, so this is the data that we've computed, and then true says remove the existing data and replace it with the new data that we're sending down. So let's pause now and pick this up in the next video.